So, spoiler season is in full swing, and if you haven't seen my most recent episode on Gory and Wise Mentor, make sure you check that episode out at some point, but don't leave just yet. Because on this episode, I'm going to be talking about a brand new commander that is exceptionally powerful. I mean, this thing is going to be a real heavy hitter, and when it hits the table, you should be pretty afraid. So with all that said, let's jump into it. So, Elminster is a brand new planeswalker that starts off at 5 starting loyalty, and it costs 3 white and a blue. It has, whenever you scry, the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn costs X less to cast, where X is the number of cards looked at while scrying this way. Its +2 is draw a card, then scry 2, and -3 is exile the top card of your library, create a number of 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature tokens with flying equal to that card's mana value. And of course, Elminster can be your commander. So obviously with that +2, Elminster can provide you not only card advantage, but also card selection, and of course that works well with that static ability as well. Because by scrying 2, then the next instant or sorcery spell that you're going to cast in this turn is going to cost 2 less to cast. I mean, assuming that you looked at, 2 cards while scrying. If you've got no cards in your library, then yeah, I guess that doesn't work, so that's probably why it's worded that way, I guess. Regardless, so even with just that, this commander has a lot going for it. Again, card advantage, card selection, and cost reduction for spells. But of course, on top of that, by ditching the top card of your library, you're going to make most likely, a ton of 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature tokens with flying. Since this commander benefits heavily off of scry and, has a scry effect itself, you can set the top of your library pretty easily to have something absolutely massive on top of it. And then, just say, okay, goodbye, card, and hello, massive dragon army. Now, obviously, those dragons are just 1/1s to start, but they are evasive, and of course, there are plenty of ways to help them hit harder and make them more impactful. On top of that, obviously, when it comes to massive spells that are instant and sorceries, you can utilize scry effects to reduce their cost by a good amount so that you can still cast them. So it's not just going to be a dead card in your hand that you're only utilizing for its high converted mana cost, it's one that is going to have a powerful effect that you can still cast thanks to this commander's cost reduction. And of course, there are certain spells out there that we'll get to in a bit that, just have a cost reduction themselves, which really helps with this as well. So this is the kind of commander that can do a lot of incredible things. I mean, again, you can make an army out of dragons out of nowhere. You can also, cast some massive spells and just have some very powerful effects. And of course, you can have a ton of card advantage and card selection. So Elminster has a lot going on for him. Now, really quick before we jump to the cards that work well with this commander, a quick note: in the description below, there's a link to the list of these cards in case you want to pick up some of them sooner rather than later, because, when a new exciting commander is spoiled, some card prices can go up quite quickly. So if you're interested in this commander, consider picking some of these up with that link. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. First up, even something as simple as Zhalfir and Void can be fantastic in this deck and can make a big difference and help you make a big play. It's a very simple land. It enters the battlefield and you scry 1 and you can tap it for a colorless. Again, as a 2-color deck, you can definitely get away with a few of these lands that might not tap for either of your colors, and this one in particular is fantastic, just giving you that additional scry 1 when it comes into play. So obviously that's some fantastic card selection, but more importantly with this commander, that is also cost reduction for your instants and sorceries. So in a way, the turn that you play Zhalfir and Void, it basically is like a 2-mana land. And of course, that can help you reach to cast a spell that you wouldn't have been able to cast. Now, obviously, in these colors, especially since we have access to blue, we've got plenty of great scry effects. Let's talk about some repeatable ones with Jace's Sanctum, Crystal Ball, and Prognostic Sphinx. Jace's Sanctum helps out in multiple ways. It says instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So just right there, that's just permanent cost reduction on all of our instants and sorceries. Not even, just after we cast, something that has scry, we still get cost reduction just for free with this. That being said, whenever we cast any instant or sorcery spell, we scry 1 thanks to this. So essentially, if we're not casting a spell that's going to have a scry, we are then going to have our next spell cost 2 less to cast, again assuming it's instant or sorcery, because of the cost reduction, and because of that, scry 1. And speaking of 2 less to cast, there's Crystal Ball, which has pay 1, tap, scry 2. So this is kind of like a mana rock in this deck in a way for our instants and sorceries when our commander's in play, because we are paying 1 to do this, but again with that scry 2, our next instant or sorcery we cast will cost 2 less to cast. So this is a great repeatable card selection effect, and of course, again, a cost reduction effect as well. Speaking of which, there's Prognostic Sphinx, which is a 3/5 flyer. We can discard a card to give it hexproof until end of turn and tap it if we need to protect it, but more importantly, when it attacks, we scry 3. Since it says flying, we are typically going to be safe to get this through on at least one opponent, and yeah, when we do attack, we get that free card selection with that scry 3, which is also then going to be, again, free cost reduction. 3 mana for the next instant sorcery, that's huge. And speaking of huge, how about Ukin's Insight, a sorcery for 3 blue that says scry X directs the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control, then draw 3 cards. So again, obviously this being a sorcery, if we have, a scry effect before this, we can reduce this cost, and it can cost as little as 2 mana, which is fantastic. And of course, this can lead to an absolutely massive play. I mean, even just with our commander being in play, that is a converted mana cost of 5, so we would scry 5 then. But of course, in this deck, and we'll get to some examples here in a bit, we do have some permanents that might have, well, a much higher cost. Another big play can come from Diviner's Portent, an instant for X blue. It says roll a d20 and add the number of cards in your hand. 1 through 14 is draw X cards, 15 plus is scry X, then draw X cards. So an X spell like this can definitely benefit from cost reduction, and of course, if we end up hitting that 15 plus, we can scry a ton, draw a ton of cards, and also get a ton of cost reduction on our next instant or sorcery. Moving on, like I mentioned earlier, we also have some giant instants and sorceries that have a high converted mana cost, but they are much easier to cast than that, and they have cost reduction essentially just built in. Treasure Cruise has Delve, so each card you exile from your graveyard while casting a spell pays for 1, and you can draw 3 cards. So again, on its face, it's an 8 mana spell, but again, when you have our cost reduction that we already have just kind of built into those scry effects in our commander, and then also the Delve, most of the time we're just going to be casting this for 1 mana. Also keep in mind, giant spells like these are obviously fantastic with our commander when they happen to be on top of our library, and we exile them to get a ton of dragons. Next up, obviously, Dig Through Time is also a fantastic card that is somewhat similar. Also has Delve, and it says look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 2 of them in your hand, the rest of the bottom of your library in any order. So this is fantastic card advantage with a lot of card selection built into it. And then we can also even consider a card like Blink Moth Infusion, which has a converted mana cost of 14. That being said, it does have affinity for artifacts, so if the build that you're doing with this commander does have a decent amount of artifacts, I mean, just even mana rocks can obviously help with this, we can of course cast this for a lot less. And of course, the more and more artifacts that we have in play, the more powerful this effect is. Untap all artifacts, so yeah, I mean, we might be able to get a lot of the mana back or even generate mana from this with our mana rocks. And of course, yeah, if it's on top of our library, I'll take 14 1/1 flying fairy dragons, please. Thank you. Next up, really quick, I just want to mention that extra turn spells can of course be very impactful with this commander, especially one like Temporal Trespass. It's a sorcery for 8 blue, so 11 mana in total, and it has Delve, so you can help cast it again by exiling things from your graveyard, and also take an extra turn for this one, exile Temporal Trespass. So obviously, being a high converted mana cost spell can help us make a ton of dragons with this that have flying, and of course also, just taking an extra turn is going to be absolutely lovely with this kind of a card. And with all the card advantage and card selection built into this deck, yeah, it can be very easy if you are going for an extra turns build to just get more and more extra turns and make it so that your opponents pretty much don't get any turns. Though when it comes to extra turns, again, some playgroups might not be too happy about that kind of a deck. So again, ask ahead of time, please. Commander is a social format, so just talk. But moving on, other kinds of cards that you're going to want to be considering are cards that are split cards or, aftermath cards. Cards that have essentially 2 mana costs on them, and the entire, converted mana cost of the card is considered for both combined. So, for example, Dusk to Dawn is a fantastic card in this deck with an overall converted mana cost of 9. And Dusk is going to destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater, and yeah, I mean, again, our dragons go under that, and our opponent's creatures very well might not, so this can very well be a one-sided board wipe. And then Commit to Memory is another fantastic one with a total converted mana cost of 10. It says put target spell or an online permanent into its owner's library second from the top, so obviously with this kind of a deck, this can help us out in a lot of ways. First up, yeah, just getting rid of an opponent's thing temporarily can be great, and secondly, yeah, if we need to save one of our own things, we can get it back into our library, and we can, scry to get to it quicker, or, again, if we've got something massive in play that's going to be dealt with, we can, put it on top of our library second from the top, we know where it's at, and then when we decide to, just activate our commander for that -3, we might get just, a ton of fairy dragons, so have fun with that. And of course, Memory, the other half of this card, is also very relevant as well. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards, so yeah, just a great wheel effect. But speaking of great effects, now let's talk about cards like Amanatu's Augury, Clone Legion, and Storm Herd. Again, these cards might not be split cards or, have any kind of a cost reduction just inherently with something like Delve, but they are fantastic and very powerful sorceries. And of course, again, with our scrying, we can reduce their cost just with our commander. Amanatu's Augury costs 8 mana in total and says, exile the top 8 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them on the battlefield. Until end of turn, for each non-land card type, you may cast a card of that type from among the exile cards without paying its mana cost. Basically, cast this, get a ton of things off the top of your library for free. And again, with the massive things that we have in this library, you can hit some really big things. Or, again, if this is on top of your library and you want a ton of fairy dragons, have fun getting 8 of them. Or you can get 9 with Clone Legion, or, you can cast it, which is going to say, for each creature target player controls, create a token that's a copy of that creature. So, if you really want to, you can double up your Fairy Dragon army if, you already have the most massive army out there, or if an opponent has some really good creatures, have fun having the exact same army that they do. And of course, keep in mind that if there are ETBs in there, you're getting those as well. So yeah, this can be a massive play. Speaking of which, there's Storm Herd, which is a sorcery for X, white, and it says create X/1/1 white Pegasus creature tokens where X is your life total. This obviously can just make your flying army even more massive. And yeah, again, if this is just on top of your library, consider, that -3 just to get 10 1/1 fairy dragons with flying 2, Either way, you can get the Pegasus if you cast it. You can, just exile it for the fairies. Whatever you want to do. Now, of course, there are a ton of massive instants and sorceries that you might want to consider for this deck. I'm just going to highlight 2 more really quick. Mnemonic Deluge is a fantastic one at 9 mana. Exile target instant sorcery card from a graveyard. Copy that card 3 times. You may cast the copies without paying their mana cost. Exile Mnemonic Deluge. Basically, all those other fantastic giant instant sorceries that you have in this deck? Well, if you get one to your graveyard, cool. Let's get 3 copies of it. And also keep in mind that this counts an opponent's graveyard as well. So if they have something massive, have fun copying that. And speaking of your opponents, well, this is kind of an off-the-wall card to play with Eternal Dominion, but there are definitely going to be some Elminster decks out there that are probably going to consider it because, well, it is a high converted mana cost card with a very, very spicy effect. It says search target opponent's library for an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land card, put that card into play in your control, then that player shuffles their library, and it's got epic. So with epic, that means that for the rest of the game, you can't play spells at the beginning of each of your upkeeps. Copy the spell except for its epic ability. You may choose a new target for the copy. Basically, steal things from your opponent's libraries for the rest of the game. You can't cast other things, but you can just keep doing that. So it can definitely be a high-risk, high-reward play, and yeah, if you're set up, and you can protect, yourself and your commander, you might be able to just keep your commander around for more time, with those dragons, to get even more dragons off the top of your library, or, to keep drawing cards and scrying, which probably isn't going to help you all that much, again, because you can't cast more cards. Regardless, again, a high-risk, high-reward play, that's definitely not for every single deck, but it is pretty spicy. And we actually even can consider some massive creatures as well. I mean, let's start with Icebreaker Kraken, an 8/8 Kraken for 10 blue, so 12 mana in total. Now, this spell is going to cost 1 less for each snow land we control. So, if you build your deck with snow basics, cool, this can cost a lot less. So this 12 mana creature can be a lot more reasonable to cast. I mean, if you've got, say, even 6 snow basics in play, pay 6 mana, cast this. And when it does enter the battlefield, artifacts and creatures target opponent controls don't untap during that player's next untap step. So this can really shut down a player when it does come into play, and also it does have return 3 snowlands you control to the owner's hands, return Icebreaker Kraken to its owner's hand. So if you're willing to do that, if you, want that ETB again, great. Or, this might be a way, and we'll talk about this here in a bit, to actually get this back to your hand so that you can then, in another way, get it on top of your library so that you can then exile your commander for 12 flyers. Now, of course, you can also consider, something like Draco, which I believe has the highest converted mana cost out of any card in Commander that is legal. Regardless, it is basically just, a 16 mana card, which is an absurd amount of mana to pay. Now, if you do, have, an island and a plains in play, cool, it's going to cost, 4 less because it costs 2 less for each basic land among land types you control, which is still 12 mana, which is a ton. And unlike Icebreaker Kraken, there's no further cost reduction, for having snow lands or whatnot. Now, the point of having Draco in this kind of a deck would not be to play it, the vast majority of the time, almost in every scenario. It would be just to utilize it as, a 16 mana card to exile the top of your library with your commander. Again, just having, that -3 on your commander to get 16 1/1 flyers can be game ending. I mean, just think if, you luck into actually being able to set your library up in that way when you get your commander into play the first time. Let's say that, ramp at least once early, and then you get your commander out on, say, turn 4, and you maybe happen to know that the top of your library is Draco because you had played as Zhalfirin Void or something like that. Cool, let's just -3 and get 16 1/1 flyers out of nowhere on turn 4. And of course, this can be done earlier too if you ramp even quicker. So again, this can definitely be a dead card in your hand though. Again, although there are ways to get rid of it, and get it back into your library. But still, I think there needs to be mentioned that there is a balance of these kinds of cards like Draco, which are just basically entirely utilized for their high converted mana cost with this commander. So you need to make sure that you're not stuffing this deck full of high converted mana cost spells that you cannot cast. But like I've mentioned a couple of times now, yes, there are ways to get cards out of your hand and on top of your library with cards like Brainstorm and Penance. Brainstorm is going to have you draw 3, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. So yeah, this is a very easy way for just 1 mana instant speed to basically draw, a couple cards, choose what you want to choose, and then put whatever cards on top to set yourself up exactly how you want to. So again, if you've got that Draco in the hand, yeah, you're probably not going to cast that, but essentially you can be like, okay, I've got Elminster in play, I will Brainstorm, and then I will get Draco on top, and 16 flying dragons. Have fun. Now the next one is Penance, and this card is quite funny, and actually it does typically work better when you've got a commander that is either black or red. But yeah, this card can definitely work if you happen to be playing against someone that has black or red. It's an enchantment for 2 and a white, and its Oracle text reads, put a card from your hand on top of your library. The next time a black or red source of your choice would deal damage this turn, prevent that damage. So this is a repeatable way to get cards out of your hand and directly on top of your library, which again is huge when you can set the top of your library with a massive converted mana cost spell for your commander to turn into flying dragons. Again, that being said, this card is definitely a risk to put in your deck. If you're not playing against anyone that has any black or red sources, then yeah, this does absolutely nothing. So a high risk, high reward decision for sure. Regardless, some much easier decisions are to include cards like Intangible Virtue, favorable wins, and Gravitational Shift. Intangible Virtue is going to give creature tokens you control +1/+1 and Vigilance. So yes, that is a massive difference, essentially doubling up the power and toughness of your creatures and giving them Vigilance, so you can swing through and keep them back on defense. Even something as simple as favorable winds can help you out as well. Creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. So yeah, again, with both these in play, now 3/3 flying dragons. Good luck to your opponents. And especially good luck to them if you've got Gravitational Shift in play. It says creatures with flying get +2/+0 and creatures without flying get -2/-0. Now, keep in mind, obviously, this impacts your opponent's creatures as well. So yes, if they've got flyers, which isn't as likely as them having non-flyers, well, their flyers do get pumped. But, for their ground creatures, -2/-0 is a lot and can really save you from a lot of damage throughout the game, while also, pumping your flyers a ton. And of course, also make sure that you're considering some tribal cards as well, with all these fairy dragons, with cards like, Sylvia Brightspear and Ojutai Soul of Winter, just to name a few. Sylvia Brightspear is a 2/2 with double strike that says dragons your team controls have double strike. So again, at the very least, it's going to help our dragons hit for essentially 2, but again, if in combination with, say, something like Gravitational Shift, they're all of a sudden going to be just absolutely monstrous and hitting for a ton. I mean, that'd be what, +2/+0, so that's 3 ones hitting, double strike, that's 6 damage from each and every single one of them. And of course, Ojutai Soul of Winter can really help us out as well. It says, whenever a dragon you control attacks, tap target non-land permanent opponent controls, that permanent doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. This can be a fantastic way for us to control the board in absolutely brutal effect against our opponents, essentially tapping down all their non-land things and not letting them untap essentially ever once we get, to a certain point where we have enough dragons in play. But yeah, at the end of the day, I can see a lot of players out there being excited about this brand new Planeswalker commander that is very powerful. It benefits heavily from scry and can also utilize in a very big way, high converted mana cost spells, either, being able to cast them with that cost reduction, or also just, exile them to make a giant army out of nowhere. But yeah, again, when building this deck, I urge you to please be careful with the number of high converted mana cost spells you include in it. Make sure you are, going about it where you're not just adding in all these Draco kind of cards just to have those high converted mana cost spells, because you might just be stuck with a bunch of high converted mana cost spells in your hand that you can't do anything with. That being said, again, by having a good balance, you can lead to some massive plays by being able to exile something with that big of a converted mana cost from the top of your library as well with this. And of course, just a reminder that in the description below, there is a link to the list of cards I'm talking about in this episode, just in case you want to pick some up sooner rather than later, because again, when players are excited about a brand new commander, card prices do tend to go up around certain cards. But also make sure you're staying tuned to this channel for even more exciting quick takes and exciting spoilers coming up soon. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So make sure you comment below and let me know what your thoughts on this episode are. And as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.